Congratulations to all my honorees who are up here as well, and of course to the graduates of the class of 2019. We look pretty good. Wow, what an honor to be asked to speak to you today, because it's a day that is so important to you. And let's be real, it's more important to your parents. Some people are getting off the payroll today. Listen, right? I once sat where you sat on not super comfortable folding chairs, waiting for the speaker to get on with it already. I'm the only thing really standing between you and your degrees. And I am very much aware that some of you just rolled in from last night. I get it. We don't need to go into that. And others of you have, of course, been preparing for this day since you arrived on campus. And I think for everyone, this really is the culmination of years of hard work and dedication, of long nights and challenging projects, of getting it done, of focusing on issues that matter, of a desire to create meaningful work. Today, you are surrounded by the people who love and support you, the people who got you here, your sisters and brothers, your parents and grandparents, whose sacrifice and whose constant belief in you, maybe when you didn't even believe in yourself, has helped you get here, has helped you achieve. And so, to the parents here today, congratulations to you, because I know that you are looking down on this sea of candidates, and even though they're grown people, you're like, that's my baby. Right? I know, I have 4 kids, and I know exactly what the anticipation of this moment has been like. And so I'd like to ask anybody who's put $1 into helping someone here graduate, stand up and be celebrated for a job well done, parents. It is emotional. Your baby is about to fly out into the real world. Well, let me lay some of your fears to rest. They are not really leaving, and I don't mean that metaphorically, like they're not leaving. These independent young people are gonna move back in with you. Let me tell you, if it's not this year, it's probably next year. When I left home for college, my parents literally knocked down the wall of my bedroom so they could expand their bedroom, like 2 days after I left. I still moved home twice. And to the graduates, I know today is bittersweet. I know you are taking in this moment your friends, your experiences. This is where you grew up intellectually, where you developed those deep and meaningful friendships and bonds. And maybe you're worried. Maybe you worry that with graduation today, you lose some of those connections. Your graduation means, you fear, that you're saying goodbye to all that you've known here at Emerson. Well, let me put those fears to rest too. This place of higher learning will be part of your life forever. The Alumni Association is small but mighty, and they will track you down and ask you for money for the rest of your lives. You're laughing like I'm joking. I'm not joking. Literally, some of you will move overseas. And you'll still get, sometimes your parents can't get through to you, and the Alumni Association will manage to reach out to you. Now, since this is a graduation, we all know how this is supposed to work. I should get up here, spout some advice. You all should dutifully nod and listen. The only problem with that is I don't really give advice, and I'll tell you why. Many years ago, a woman's magazine asked me what was the best advice I had ever gotten from my mother, and it's really Mother's Day, right? So this is a good time to tell this story. It was a Mother's Day feature, and they said, we're gonna give you a half-page photo with you and your mom hugging, and then you could have like the line of what the great advice was. Now, my mom, who passed away recently, was never a warm, fluffy, sweet mom. She just wasn't. She was like tough immigrant mom. And so I said, I think that's a really terrible idea. And they said, no, Best advice your mom ever gave, hugging. I said, okay, well, my mom's best advice was, most people are idiots. Needless to say, we never made it into the magazine, and I never heard from her again. But really, I think it was some of her best advice to me, because I think she meant some people are idiots, and if you listen to them, you're a bigger idiot. You will be told in many various ways all the things that you cannot do, that you should not do, that you will absolutely, positively fail if you try to do, and so, if I may ask, please do not listen. Most people are idiots, and sometimes they just don't know. They're speaking from fear. And as you head into the world today, you need to be fearless. Problems can be solved, and this is always the way it's been. That's not an answer. And nuance and discussion can be inserted back into our most critical conversations that are happening right now in our world. My parents were role models in not listening. They spent much of their lives ignoring people's bad advice. They're immigrants, as was mentioned. They came to America to pursue their education. My mom, black and Cuban, my dad, white and Australian. And they came to the United States at exactly the moment when interracial relations were tense and hostile, the late 1950s. And they met because they both attended daily mass. My dad had a car. I should mention, any Catholics here, you know the whole entire point of the story, you should go to mass. That's how these stories generally go. My dad had a car, so he would drive to church, but my mom didn't, and so she would walk. And my dad would basically hit on my mom. There's no way to clean that up. He would pull over his car, wind down the window. Young people, there was a time we didn't have power windows. And he'd ask her if she wanted a ride, and she'd say, no, thank you, because you don't take a ride from someone you don't know well, apparently, even to church. And day after day, every single day, he would ask her if she wanted a ride, and she'd say, no, thank you. And then one day she said yes, and they made a date to go on a date. But because it was Baltimore, Maryland in 1958, every restaurant they went to, yay Baltimore, every restaurant they went to wouldn't serve them together. They'd say to my dad, you can come in. They'd say to my mom, you cannot come in, and you certainly cannot come in and sit together. And so after being turned away from restaurant after restaurant after restaurant, my mother brought my father back to her apartment and whipped him up an amazing meal, fabulous Cuban cook. And the entire point of her story was not, when she would share it with me and my 3 sisters, and sometimes my 2 brothers too, wasn't about injustice or about discrimination or about just unfair policies. It was, girls, if you could cook, you can get a man. Never forget that. So I can't cook, but I like to say I can't make it, but I can make it happen. That's just as good. When my parents got married at the end of 1958, interracial marriage was illegal in Maryland and in 16 other states, so they drove to Washington, D.C., and they got hitched, and then they drove back and lived illegally as a married couple in Baltimore. And when their friends said, whatever you do, don't have children because biracial kids will have no place in this world, I'm number 5 of 6. My parents were very good at not listening to bad advice. But they knew that they were on the right side of history, and they were willing to let everybody else catch up. In fact, by 1967, which was the year my little brother was born, that year was the very year the Supreme Court would overturn the ban on interracial marriage. My parents had 6 kids. Their illegal marriage was now legal. My mother used to say, if you wait for people to get with what you're doing, you might be waiting a long time. And I'd ask my mom, so what was it like in the early 1960s? My 2 older sisters were born in Baltimore, and she said, you know, people would spit on us as we walked. That's what I said, what? And I said, oh my God, what did you do? And she said, she used to call me Lovey, and she said, I think the things that really framed for me how I thought about journalism. She said, Lovey, we knew America was better than that. And by that, she was also opting in to make the kind of changes that needed to be made. That it wasn't, so we're gonna stand back and let other people, we are going to opt in. And for me, understanding the need to be part of that solution and that change and that making things better, that's what made me wanna tell stories. When I sat where you sat, I wanted to know all the details. Will I have a career? Will I have a good job? Will I be passionate about that career? Will I be successful? Will I make money? Yes, 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 but those are, I think, kind of the wrong questions. A better question, I think, that will lead you to a great career and great passion and great success is, what can I contribute? Because I truly believe that's what actually matters. And not everybody can say that their education has prepared them for making contributions, but you can. So I don't think you really need advice, except for don't listen to stupid advice. But do seek out others' stories and really try to hear them. I think the media at times is not the best translator of other stories, and you can change that. Try to hear people, especially in this environment where we live in our information bubbles. Try to really listen. I've tried to make a career out of that, and it has been rewarding because I think when you really listen, then in turn, you can have an impact. And remember, as you calculate student loan debt and maybe even starter home debt, your real debt as a human being is to other human beings. And you are better prepared than others to repay that debt. Because I think it's with facts and with data and with evidence and hard work that you can help us undergird the real stories that help us understand each other. Our differences, for sure, our similarities, and those things are what make the world better. I started my career in TV news at a time when cable news was just getting started, and one of my very first jobs was to carry the cell phone. Cell phones used to be the size of a brick, maybe even like 2 bricks. And literally my job was to carry that thing around. It was very heavy. And there was only the evening news. Everybody waited for the evening news to do a story. Education stories back then were considered soft and only for women. Stories about childcare were considered to be less weighty and important. And today, of course, news breaks all day, every day, and we grapple with education policy. We haven't figured out ways to solve how do you find good childcare for working parents. And today's social media allows us just to funnel the stories and perspectives that we care about into our lives and lose everything else. Elected officials, let's be real, often choose the live shots in the halls of Congress rather than work with their fellow elected officials because the game isn't solutions, it's owning the narrative. And I think sometimes all of that is why we're here today. People lack a faith in institutions, media, government, because they feel like they're not being served by them. And we're at a time when the truth itself is under attack. Today, the media often chases stories and chases eyeballs rather than camp out and dig into complicated and nuanced conversations. This has to change, and people in this room are in position to change it. And every day we shout at each other, conservatives believe this, liberals believe this, but it has been my experience that regardless of someone's political beliefs under their very firmly held positions, people want the same things. They really do. They want better and safer communities. They want schools that serve their kids. They want opportunities for good jobs, and they want a chance to be heard. Those things and those needs are everywhere, among everyone. And while this country is divided among partisan lines, let's be real, there is still a lot that we share. You might not know it because we don't talk about it a lot, but it exists. And I think that's where we have to start. If you focus on problems and not solutions, if you focus on the litany of differences and not, okay, there is a sliver of common ground where we can start a conversation. If you focus on your amazingly awesome, snarky Twitter account, but not actually getting to know human beings, you probably won't solve any problems, and you definitely will not change the world. I became a reporter because I wanted to tell stories about people, and then pretty quickly I realized the best way to do that was to hand them the mic and let them tell their own stories. And I wanted to ask tough questions and understand people's lives and their perspectives. And my job was never about interviewing famous people and political pundits. It's about understanding people and their hopes and their dreams and their choices and their fears. And sometimes I think we have forgotten that. When I started reporting documentaries like Black in America and Latino in America and Muslim in America, Giving the microphone to undercovered communities was considered groundbreaking, which is even hard to believe. And we did a documentary on coal miners in West Virginia and female rescue workers at Ground Zero, and documentaries on New Orleans post-Katrina and Haiti. And we looked at urban schools and rural schools and found that actually they have a lot in common. We found coal miners who wanted to build solar farms, and conservative Republicans and liberal Democrats who were able to meet in the middle on some things and build some consensus, not on everything, and not even on a lot of things sometimes, but on some things. And so I've tried in my work to reveal more about America through the voices of the people who are ignored or misunderstood, and give some perspective. And I think if we start with understanding that an individual's dream doesn't have to be at odds with somebody else's dream, and that we could potentially be part of the same whole, that a national dream could stand for something, I think we can actually get there. So I will encourage you today to be fearless in searching for the truth. Not the truth that someone's told you, or even the conventional wisdom, which sometimes we take for truth, but to go to people and talk to them about the truth of their lives as they're lived and their experiences, and then fight for those things to get to a platform. Whether you're a journalist on air, or you're in a boardroom, or you're just in society, there is a myth that people only want to hear about those things that reflect the things that they identify with. I remember when we started doing our Black in America documentary series, people would literally say to me, "So don't make it like too black." I was like, "This is called Black in America." But you know what I said? Okay. It would go on to become one of the top-rated series. Why? Because it told stories of people. And our documentary about the women of Ground Zero looked at women who'd been left out of the narrative of rescue workers, just told a different story, and it won, which is important, the ratings war, because it just told a different story. You have the power to change what we see. News can serve people. It doesn't have to be talking heads screaming at each other. It actually could be people who dig into the reality and facts and data and undergirding a narrative about our stories. And that's not just for journalism students, that's for all of us. We can demand more. It really matters. The best thing about my job, and this will be the best thing about your careers, using your research, your work, your exploration, you can make the world better. Asking the difficult questions, the challenging questions, standing up for the truth, and inserting facts back into our national discourse. And it's not enough to just do the work. You actually have to make sure you share the work and make sure those narratives reach a broader audience. Don't forget that ultimately you serve people, and they deserve your best. They deserve to be heard by you. You have a tremendous opportunity. And my best and most important stories have always come from people whose names you'll never know and never remember, because they're stories of the American dream. And regardless of the next step that you're taking, you can work to understand people where they are. You have succeeded in learning how to learn, but I think to make a life, not just a living, requires learning what it really means to be responsible to other people. And if you're cynical and snarky, and I get that 2019, that's kind of what it's all about. I think that's a laziness. I think it's much harder to be thoughtful and kind and compassionate and take those moments every single day to stand up for someone, whether they look like you or they don't look like you, and to try to really work for solutions. It's hard. It is hard. What will make you good at your jobs will be showing up and doing the work, and what will make you great at your jobs will to be doing all those things you will never get credit for and you'll never get paid for. To infuse every single day with humanity and authenticity and honesty and fearlessness and compassion, those things that we sometimes seem not to celebrate in people, but trust me, that is what makes people great. Now, generally speaking, I hate when speakers throw out quotes like, "It was the great Teddy Roosevelt who once said," but there's one quote that is worth learning, memorizing, and I'm gonna share it with you. And it comes from Dante, so you know it's hardcore. Dante, he didn't play. And he said this: "The hottest places in hell are reserved for, Dante, the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of great moral crisis maintain their neutrality, right? There is nothing worse than doing nothing and saying nothing when your voice is needed. And as you head out into the world, to jobs and new experiences and more education, never ever forget that your purpose is to serve. We're counting on you. No pressure. Congratulations, the class of 2019.